That was powerful, wasn't it? It was absolutely something else. Um, it takes you back to so much. Hi, good evening. I'm Faith Morris, Chief Marketing and External Affairs Officer for the National Civil Rights Museum. And I'm moderating this town hall tonight. I hope everyone did enjoy the play. It is powerful and it has so many moments worth talking about. The play sold out right away, so we had a good audience for it. The town hall discussion will focus on the impact of Emmett Till's death and what it has had, the impact on our society today. We have the right panel to delve into this discussion, so let me introduce the panel. Gloria Brown Marshall has created 7 produced plays. Her plays include Shot, Caught a Soul, about a Black teen haunting the white officer who killed him. Class is about the racial fight over the American dream. Her screenplay, Sergeant Freeman, was a finalist in official selection at national and international film festivals. Gloria attended the MFA program at St. Lawrence College and the CTI Broadway producing program. She is also the author of She Took Justice, The Black Woman, Law and Power, Race, Law, and American Society, 1607 to present, The Voting Rights War, and several poems, including White Privilege. Let's welcome Gloria, and we will hear more from her. Yes, we can. Director Bobby Field has garnered numerous awards from the film festival circuit, including Best Actor from the Westwood International Film Festival for his performance in Guy in Role 5, which also earned the Audience Award at the Cinquest International Film Festival, and Best in Fest at the SoCal International Film Festival, and is currently set for worldwide release in 2022. Welcome, Bobby Field. Derek Johnson serves as president and CEO of the of the NAACP, a title he has held since October 2017. President Johnson formerly served as vice chairman of the NAACP National Board of Directors, as well as state president of the Mississippi State Conference, NAACP. He's a longstanding member and leader of the NAACP. Mr. Johnson also helped guide the association through a period of re-envisioning and reinvigoration. Welcome, Derek Johnson. Professor Davis Houck has spent the better part of the last 3 decades exploring the rhetorical dynamics of the Black freedom movement in the United States. He worked extensively on how the media shaped the narrative of the kidnap and lynching of Emmett Till. That scholarship continues with his work on the Emmett Till Memory Project. It's a digital app for smartphones, and it's designed to tell the story in the 21st century. He currently is the Fannie Lou Hamer Professor of Rhetorical Studies, a professorship that celebrates the life and work of the sharecropper turned civil rights activist from rural Mississippi. And certainly not the least of all is Tennessee State Senator Ramesh Akbari. She's a proud Memphian and passionate advocate for justice and equality. She serves in the Tennessee State Senate representing District 29, which includes downtown Memphis and parts of Shelby County. She was elected to State Senate in 2018 after serving 3 terms in the State House of Representatives. And currently, Senator Akbari is the chairwoman for the Senate Democratic Caucus. The senator's policies aim to improve student outcomes, reform outdated criminal justice rules, and to expand middle-class security and opportunities to more Tennessee families. She stands up for the people who live in her district, as well as Tennesseans and all walks of life. Welcome our panel, and let's just get right into it. Gloria, what made you write this play?
I wrote it, and so many murders that had taken place. And I just said, I'm a constitutional scholar, a legal historian, a professor, civil rights attorney, and that meant nothing because the justice that I wanted was something I couldn't get. So I decided that I would create the justice I wanted. I would make my characters come back and demand answers to certain questions. And I believe the guilty conscience, not just of individuals, but of this country, requires that the dead speak so that we can move on with our living. So this is the second play of a three group plays of involving people having to actually face their sins through a spiritual awakening. And I call this form of writing spiritual realism. And it deals with faith. It deals with the living spirits that we all claim that are around us when we lose someone. It's like they're there. Well, if they're there, then I'm putting them to work to do some truth telling in this
Right.
country that's so necessary.
I knew Mamie Till Mobley, and she would really be something if she could have seen this play. She would love to have heard from her after seeing this. Bobby, so you took this script and brought it to life. What made you want to produce this play? And you're on mute, Bobby. There you go.
Yet another 2021 thing to happen, start talking with the mute button on. But I want to address the elephant in the room first. If people saw what I saw just now, it wasn't representative of our film. It was the dial-up, you've got mail version of watching the movie that we made, the play. All of those issues, the sluggishness, the muted sound, and all of that stuff is not part of our film. So I'm sure we're going to talk about it more, but you will be able to, I hope the audience here will go to the website, which we'll give the link to for everybody so they can watch it the way it's meant to be seen. Because that you could barely follow it or understand it, you know. But that said, the reason I wanted to do this play was I had worked with Gloria before on the last one she did for the Pulitzer Center, Shot, and I edited that one. I didn't direct that one. And me and Gloria got along so well, and we enjoyed working together so well that we decided to work on this one together. And as soon as I read it, it was the same incredible writing that was part of the first film that we had worked on. This piece moved me from day one, from the first read of the script all the way through editing it. I mean, it was a very emotional piece to work on, more so than anything I've worked on before. So I connected to it right at the top and just wanted to do my best to bring her great writing justice, you know. So we got a great cast together. Natalie Avital was the casting director. I had worked with a couple of the actors before, but some of them I hadn't. And it was really them that brought it to life with their great performances.
So Gloria and Bobby, you guys were a really dynamic duo. You pulled out something, I tell you, the storytelling is amazing. And actually, let's just think about how this story was told. And it certainly was from a different perspective than you might have thought it would be, right? So panel, and any of you can answer this. What do you think about the play being told from the accuser's perspective? I mean, do you think Carolyn should still pay today for the accusations and her causing the death of Emmett Till? But let's talk about it coming from her perspective.
Well, let me I'll start, and then I want people really to join in and say,
Please.
Thank you so much, Derek Johnson, and of course, um, um, Ms. Eckberry. I appreciate you here so much, and Davis Hauk. Thank you. I know you're very busy people, and the fact that you would come for this is so important. And I remember actually interviewing you, Mr. Johnson, on my radio show. Within the first week, you ascended to the office. So I am honored that you're here, that you're all here. Um, I wrote it from the perspective of Carolyn, and people may not believe this, but when the issue came a few years ago about her recanting and saying that he never did this, I had already started writing my own Emmett Till play in which she recanted. There were so many things that happened that just connected, and I was like, I'm writing this, and I would find out later, because I did not read the book of the person who, the historian who actually wrote this his book on her recanting and what she said in the story that he had on her. I decided not to do that. And it made me think about the sin travels. The sin travels generationally. And I write works that are generational works because people think what they do in their one lifetime just affects them without thinking how many generations later it will affect. Their children, their children's children, and the sin is not going to go away. And that's one of the issues of this country. It keeps thinking that, it can murder people, and in the intro that you might not have heard, that it was 1669 when the Virginia colony legislature, the House of Burgesses, passed a law saying that a European killing an African would not be a felony. So if you can imagine, it was 1669 they passed that law, how long they've been killing us with impunity. And people think that sin is going somewhere, and I believe it's not. And so that's why sometimes I think, just like this trial, we call it the George Floyd trial when it's actually Derek Chauvin's on trial. We need to think about the sin that's going to carry on his family line and how long that sin is going to be carried. So I wanted to speak from the standpoint of the sinner, because, and that's why I decided to write from her perspective, and how she's carrying this sin. It's not going away, and these people are going to be tormented, and they might think they've gotten away with murder, and maybe through the so-called criminal injustice system they have, but through a spiritual justice system they haven't. And that's what I wanted to bring forward as a playwright.
So Derek Johnson, I know how much we get it at the National Civil Rights Museum. We have it actually in the museum, the story of Emmett Till. So I know you get it even more than we do because you're out there fighting for this. What do you think about it coming from her perspective?
I think the narrative is important, and thank you all for and inviting me to be a part of this conversation. I won't be able to be here the whole time, but the narrative is important, and to understand this episode in our history from multiple perspectives is also important. The gravitational pull of white culture and white supremacy for them to do wrong is so strong that you had many people who was in fear of actually standing up for justice who lived in southern states during this time period, that it is not unusual for someone not to tell the truth in a scenario like this. I moved from Detroit to Mississippi to go to Tougaloo College. And to understand the different faces of racism, right? In the North, racism shows up where people will advocate for your rights, but they don't want to live next door to you. In the South, people don't mind living close to you so long as you don't have any rights. And so my ability to come here, go to Tougaloo College, and understand this story from the perspective of civil rights activists, from the perspective of people who lived in Glendora, who lived in Tutwiler, who lived in Charleston and Tallahatchie County, to understand it intellectually, understand how the residual effects of the trauma has impacted our community. To see it from this perspective is so important because this story, this incident really ignited what we call the civil rights movement in many ways. That many of the young people at the time who were the same age as Emmett Till, when they became of age, 17, 18 years old, they took it upon themselves to get involved, whether they were students at Howard or Morehouse or Tougaloo or Fisk. We now know many of those young people as active with the Student Non-Body Coordinating Committee. And so my formative civil rights years was around many of those individuals, and to hear from this perspective is important because as I hear them talk about it, they knew she was lying. They knew she was lying the whole time, that they understood the nature of white supremacy in the South, and they would talk about colonialism in two ways, rigid and flexible. Rigid colonialism were people who were really dogmatic and they would cause harm. Flexible would buddy up to you and talk about how you're a good person until you get out of line. And in that environment of Tallahatchie County, it was that rigid colonial system that no one could get out of line and speak up against white supremacy. And if you was called on to validate a wrongdoing, you was expected to do so. And if you didn't, you'll get run out of town. So it was interesting to hear from this perspective. And I really appreciate you all really positioning this conversation and this narrative so people can understand the oppressive nature of white supremacist culture then, but also related to white supremacist culture now.
It really does give you an opportunity. You can imagine that this really did happen that way. You can imagine that it's pretty close to what absolutely could have happened. The culture was the way it was then, and it is the way it is now. So now what should we do about Carolyn now? I mean, she has confessed. And this play has given us some idea of what she was going through when she was telling that tale, you know, what led to it. But the truth is that Emmett Till was killed unjustly, and it was a lie. And we know this happens. This is a good example of what has happened, and it's still happening. So nothing has happened yet. So what should happen?
Well, final response, I'm gonna check out here. I am a firm believer. If you allow domestic terrorism to go and no one is held accountable, you can ensure there will be more acts of domestic terrorism. And what we have witnessed from this episode, 1954 and forward, many acts of domestic terrorism in our community. What we witnessed on January 6th, an act of domestic terrorism. So the real question is, how do we hold people accountable, whether it was her for her infraction then, whether it's the people who will bring harm against our communities, plural, now. Accountability is so important.
For past wrongs and current wrongs, we still got to do something.
Absolutely. I mean, think about the harm in the Delta of Mississippi, because the environment at this time was a Supreme Court decision. 1954, Brown versus Board of Education. You have to integrate. 1955, this nonsensical remedy of all deliberate speed. In law school, I learned that means that's like taking X-Lax with a sleeping pill. What you get a mess. And in that mess, it created the White Citizen Council. In that mess, it created segregated academies. In that mess, you had an uptick in domestic terrorism that was operating under groups like the Christian Knights of the KKK, causing more harm in our communities. In that mess, you created a space where even the successful Black folks, Dr. R. Howard in Bolivar County, or Aaron Henry in Clarksdale, they couldn't even bank in Mississippi. They had to come to Tri-State Bank in Memphis because of the harm, the reign of fear. Accountability is so important, whether it was a lie 60 years ago or the infraction last week. If we in this country, African Americans, are held accountable for the least amount of infraction, those who have caused this type of disastrous harm should also be held accountable.
So it really brings us to this question, and it's hard to move anywhere without talking about what's happening with George Floyd. You know, we're reliving that. We can't unsee his death. It also reminds us of Tamir Rice. I mean, the names go on and on and on and on. What can we do to change this now? Senator, what can we do? Glad to see you.
Certainly, and happy to be back in Memphis. outside of the craziness that is taking place in the state legislature this week, every week.
This week, this week?
Every week. This week was particularly great. Okay, but I think what we have to do first is acknowledge the problem. A lot of times that's, especially in a lot of Southern controlled legislatures, they're not acknowledging the problem, not acknowledging that it actually happened. In the wake of the protests around George Floyd, the Tennessee legislature decided to make it a felony for people to protest on state property, camping out overnight. There were moves to try and say, okay, well, yes, George Floyd was particularly heinous, not him, but the situation. However, that's not the typical, that's not the standard. There's no need for police reform. There's no need for a change in training or getting rid of qualified immunity. We don't need to address that. And that seems to be a real problem, I think, in our Southern legislatures. It's really going to take the federal government to act. But we have to acknowledge, and we have to try and craft laws that hold people accountable. And I know that, and this is something that has to happen on a federal level, but I know if they can address qualified immunity, that will take a lot of the teeth that'll take a lot of the, it will put some teeth into punishment for those who are bad actors. But in Tennessee, I don't know if you remember, a couple of years ago, State Representative Johnny Turner passed legislation right before she retired that would create a commission that would investigate cold cases from the civil rights era in Tennessee. And they are doing work now, and the things that they're coming up with is just horrific. But we have to, as people, we have to stay engaged. And you see what happened in Georgia, where people over time registered to vote and got folks activated so that they could elect officials that held their beliefs and their needs dear. And I think we're going to have to do that everywhere. Otherwise, we will have people who create laws that empower such acts of domestic terrorism. And there's no real punishment for it, even if you look at what happened on January the 6th. But I believe that there has to be accountability no matter what, because that life that was lost, that generation that was killed, that bloodline that was halted, there has to be a consequence for that.
Any other comments on this? Because this is, I mean, what happened to Emmett Till so long ago, I mean, the trail from there to now is pretty bloody.
If I could jump in, Faith.
Absolutely, Professor.
Thank you. Congratulations, Gloria. This is a really powerful piece, and Bobby bringing it to life. Really enjoyed being a part of it. And thank you for the invitation. Playing off of what my two colleagues have said, I think it's important to take a page from Mamie Till here, which is to publicize, to circulate, and prosecute. So I think it's worth saying, white America did not see the postmortems of Emmett Till in 1955, and we forget that. Black America saw the postmortems because they showed up in Jet, they showed up in the Baltimore Afro-American, they showed up in the Cleveland Call-and-Post, they showed up in pretty much every Black newspaper I saw that's published in 55 had some version of that postmortem. To this day, white America has not seen that postmortem unless they go online. White newspapers won't touch it. I was working with Jerry Mitchell to try to get USA Today to do this. They wouldn't do it. So my generation who grew up without the internet, we didn't know who Emmett Till was, in part because we didn't have the image in front of us. We didn't subscribe to Jet magazine. But what's happening now with George Floyd and all kinds of other cases is we're confronted, right, with this horror, the video, the 9 minutes, the Ahmaud Arbery video. We're confronted with that, and it's awful and it's horrific to watch. But guess what? It's really good at bringing cases to the public eye, and I think that's what's urgent. We got these things in our pockets and purses that we can use them to publicize and to circulate and to show people this happened in my neighborhood, and then to hold our lawmakers accountable for pursuing justice in these cases. Yeah, we need police reform too. I get that. We totally need police reform. But I think what Mamie Till did was just incredibly brave, and we need to follow her lead here, which was to make friends with the press, get the images out there, and then do our best to prosecute.
She actually did then what's happening now.
Mm-hmm.
She did with Dr. King did the same thing, pull media in. If you see the images, if you have any humanity, any heart, any decency, it has to do something to you.
Yeah, and we're also learning in the George Floyd case just how traumatic that woman experience, just sitting there filming that 9 minutes was.
Right.
And Mr. Johnson had talked about how so many people are traumatized and don't want to come forward. And Gloria, one person that doesn't make it into your script, who to me is kind of the hero of this case, is Willie Reed, and most people don't know him. And Willie Reed was discovered largely by the Black press late during the trial and testified as this 18-year-old kid, right, who had nothing to gain, zero, and everything to lose, to testify before all these angry white people in Sumner of what he saw that morning. So he's our only eyewitness to what happened to Emmett on the morning of August 28th, is Willie Reed. People tend to buy into the William Bradford Huey narrative, which is a bunch of garbage. Throw your Look magazine out from January 56 because it's garbage. That's the so-called confession. That's the version of Emmett that people want to believe. And obviously, Gloria, it shows up in your screenplay, right? White Mississippians still want to believe that version of Emmett Till, that would-be rapist, that aggressive 14-year-old, which is absurd. Willie Reed saw the scared 14-year-old boy on the back of the truck as it went into Sunflower County. And again, as soon as he testified, guess what he did? He fled to Chicago because they were going to kill him. And he lived a long life, and you'll see him in the documentaries. You'll see him in Keith Beauchamp's documentary. You'll see him in Stanley Nelson's documentary. And what he did was, to me, just remarkable, because he saw it, he came forward, and he told the truth. And we know he told the truth because the FBI went and investigated.
Yes. Yes. Carolyn Bryan is what we call today's Karen. And we know Karen is a white woman who uses her privilege to get her way. What can we do to educate people of the consequences of falsely accusing African Americans of crimes? Now, we understand that they potentially know that that's an issue. I don't think they're ignorant of that, but that it's so prolific, it is so prevailing. It is an issue that is growing. What are we going to do about Karens and Kens? Because Carolyn Bryant certainly was one, a Karen.
Well, I go to and ask the senator, because in New York State where I live, they've worked on legislation, and in certain local communities, local jurisdictions have worked on legislation to make it clearer that there are criminal issues and accountability and consequences for people who abuse the police in this manner. And so there is already a part of this. I'll put my constitutional law hat on. The Supreme Court said years ago in cases that were non-criminal cases that you cannot use state or federal government to perpetuate racism. That's already known. So we also know that abuse of process and other types of ways in which you cannot use government facilities to perpetuate racism or discrimination or to break the law. So if we would start fining these people and having not just a monetary fine, but the threat of some type of 10 days in jail for abusing the government in perpetuating racism, I think that we could limit some of this. And goes back to this accountability, because I think if we don't use that prosecutor's office, for 400 years, a prosecutor for the most part has not prosecuted these cases. It was very unusual in the Emmett Till case that the case was prosecuted in the first place. So, but in most of these cases, they've not been prosecuted. And in most cases, those people who are abusing the police department by using them as their own private pit bull have not been held criminally accountable. And so I've written about this and I've talked about this, but yes, we need to make sure that we fine people, because there's the most laws are already on the book to fine people who use ambulance services or police departments, and they're filing false complaints, or they're using or abusing these services. But we don't use this when it comes to white people. We've seen it when somebody has gone missing and they're just run away, and we say, well, we're going to charge you the amount of money it took to go and investigate this case because, you know, this was not a real case and you abused the services and the funds, and these police could be doing something else. So if we started using that for some of these Karens and Kens, then maybe we could, you know, barbecue while black, sell Girl Scout cookies while black, go to the park while black, you know, sell lemonade while black. You know, there's so many things that, you know, we've been, you know, little by little, the services we're supposed to be able to use, even our national parks, we pay into these things and we can't use them because they have been made into fearful places where we feel vulnerable and don't have protection. So speaking of January 6th, whom do we call now? What police department do we call? You know, Karen and Ken can get the police to come in for somebody who's going door to door and just getting petitions or something for someone running for office. But we can't get the police department to protect us when our lives are in danger from people who want to harm us racially. And that includes Asian Americans and others. And I'll turn this around to one other thing. And that is Emmett Till resonates with us today because it is such a disgrace and a sin that this happened. And yet there are people who are angry for us for actually being mad for our people being killed. How dare you argue with us about the killing that took place? Just forget it, because for most of this country's history, people of color have been killed with impunity. How dare you protest about us killing you? How dare you be mad or sad to show any emotion after we, as America's whites, kill you? Is actually, for the most of American history, it was unheard of for any person of color to actually say something. They were supposed to show up passing the lynched bodies and go to work and not look sad, even if that was their relative hanging from the tree or burned alive. This is American history, that you're not supposed to get mad over people who want to slay folks who look like you. So that's why we've got so much ugliness and I keep calling it sin, diabolical behavior that's happened in this so-called democracy, where there are still pictures on the internet that you can find where people have been burned alive. Burned alive. And the reason why we have the pictures is because these people stood in front of the smoking body and took pictures of themselves because they were proud and made those pictures in the postcards and sent those postcards around. They are shooting at the sign in Mississippi, the sign for Emmett Till. Every year somebody goes down and he shoots the sign, you know, the plaque that's put up in his name, you know, somebody tears it down every year. So they're angry. How dare you actually, you know, have a monument, want to do something to honor this person whose life was lost and symbolized so much. So the sickness, the psychological illness that we're dealing with in this country is so deep that when you ask, what can we do? When somebody's identity is based on them feeling better about themselves as long as their foot is on our necks or their knee is on our neck, or we're laying prone on the ground in some way of submissiveness, then we have to look at what does it mean to be white in this country. And that's why I put those words in those characters' mouths, because we can't keep having this conversation without these white people owning up to their part of this problem. We can't look at it like it's a black problem in a vacuum and we can solve it ourselves, because they won't leave us alone. Even if we went to our own neighborhoods, they come in here, go to the neighborhoods and want to do harm. I mean, we've got to have a reckoning, and that's why this play hopefully will have conversations so that, you know, this country can actually see how sick it is.
It's hard to see this play and not want to talk about it. First, you are burning mad about it because you're reliving this baby's death. He was 14. But I implore you and Bobby, Gloria, keep writing, you know, telling the truth about what happened. You know, our history is a hard lesson. It's a hard lesson, but it's one that needs to be told, and it needs to be told often. There's still so many stories, and I'm so glad you picked Emmett Till, because it's an example of what was happening then and what's happening now, what's been happening all along history. What final words would you all have to say because this has been a really important night, and the topic is certainly one that warrants us giving some deep thought and hopefully some action in some way. We had folks here at the table. We've got Senator Agberry, we had Derek Johnson, both of them really working, to try to get things right, to better this nation. And Gloria writing about it and raising our consciousness about it. And thank you, Bobby, for making it happen, producing it and getting it out. And for Professor Houck, what you're doing in helping us to understand what role media played. And I love that you're doing Fannie Lou Hamer. Hopefully, Gloria, you'll do something about Fannie Lou Hamer, because she has a different kind of story to tell.
Yeah.
But let's have some final moments.
Can I start? I'm just going to talk about two things real quick. So, we're concerned about legacy here. That's where you started us off, Faith, legacy, and where are we with Emmett? And I'm super excited, and I want everybody listening to us to know that Women of the Movement is going to air probably early next year. It's filming right now in Mississippi and Memphis. It features Emmett and Mamie. It's their story. And I've been told, because I got good friends in the movie, that it's going to be a knockout. And, we've, for 66 years now, been working on telling the story in a movie, and we've never had it in a feature-length sort of big budget Hollywood. And it's going to be great, because it's going to be in 6 parts, A-list cast, uses my good friend Devery Anderson's book as the script. And it's just going to be fantastic. The other thing, Gloria, I don't know anybody, I don't think I'm breaking any news here, but I heard this from a good source. Carolyn Bryant's not well. Her sister just passed 2 weeks ago, and her sister let a colleague know that her sister is not well, and we might lose her this year as well. And that's going to be interesting to see, Gloria. I'm kind of thinking of legacy, right? And how will history write about Carolyn Bryant? What will they write? We know there's a memoir somewhere in the UNC special collections, and we're not supposed to see it till 2037. What does she say? What does she own up to, if anything? What will her granddaughter say, right, upon her passing? Of course, we all want her to talk now, but I don't know that that's going to happen. But those are my 2 final thoughts.
Absolutely. Senator Agberry, give us a final thought.
Well, first of all, thank you, Gloria and Bobby, for bringing this all to life. Thank you, Faith, for what you do and how awesome you bring conversation to life. For me, it's kind of echoing what everyone said. We have to acknowledge the past and how it still impacts the present. I tell my colleagues when they try and say, well, I didn't do this, or that's not me, or this and the other. I'm like, listen, my mother was born in a segregated hospital, okay? She could only go to the zoo on a certain day. Our schools in Shelby County through the municipal school districts have essentially been resegregated. So we have a ways to go. When my colleagues try and pull me aside and ask about privilege and what does that really mean? And, are you sure? And, I've had similar things happen to me. And I think you have no idea what it means to be a Black person in America. And so my parting thought is, I think we have to recognize that the past was not that long ago, and the future is going to be determined by how we handle it now in the present.
I'm going to ask for Deirdre, if you could put the website in the chat so folks can have that before we go. That'd be great if it's not already there. Bobby?
Yes. I would like to thank everybody, this incredible panel, an amazing group of people. Thank you for being here and for talking to us about this subject. And I'd like to thank everybody who signed up and came to watch the movie. We will have, it'll be in the chat, I think it's there already, the website, and then I'm sure we can get anyone who registered to see the movie, we'll make sure that you get an email that has the link in it as well, so that you can see it tomorrow. I believe it goes up tomorrow at 9 a.m. And you'll be able to see it in real time and without all the glitches. I think that's correct. That's what I just read. So, and thank you.
So just to add to what you just said, Bobby, the play is going to be available in the morning, 10 Central a.m. And you can visit The Dream of Emmett Till, that's the website, dreamsofemmett-till-play.com. So hopefully that's in the chat somewhere, so you can write it down. dreamsofemmett-till-play.com. And then now, Gloria, take us out.
Well, I think, once again, I thank all of you for being here. I thank Deidre and her firm and everybody who worked so hard. And thank you, Faith, for moderating this and all the talent. And we know that we don't just step into these roles, that we have been doing the work for a very long time. And all of us in our own way, in our own special imprint on what it is that we're doing, but we're all one little sand on the beach trying to make the world a better place. Two things happened in the play. One was the oppression of women. So Carolyn Bryant was being oppressed by the times as well, where women were oppressed in the 1950s, and she's taking her oppression out on in this way in which we do it in this country, in the pecking order of some kind. This triangle. And so one group then oppresses the next group oppresses. And so this white Karen character is probably being oppressed at home. And that's why she turns around and oppresses somebody black. And it's like, the man just yelled at his job, and he comes home and he yells at his wife, and the wife spanks the boy, and the boy kicks the dog, and the dog bites the cat. We've got to figure out how to stop the chain of oppression that happens in this country. And that is something that, history is going to repeat itself. We're not kids anymore. This is not that young country that of the 1950s and 60s. This is a mature place where we have to handle our problems. I want Dreams of Emmett Till to go forward. And Bobby and I have talked about the stage play, so that, that we want it to have a life in which it can go into these different areas around the country and around the world, because there are Emmett Tills in other countries as well. And there are ways in which we're going to need Emmett Till, like George Floyd, to help us reconcile, to have a place of departure, so we can sit around and have a conversation and begin to work on the healing process. And I hope that that's what this play does, that it has the conversations and necessary around to this, and you can have it in your privacy of your own home. Play this at home. Maybe your relatives need to see it. Maybe it's something that you can do in a group setting. This is free. This is free for people. For that's how much I want, and we've invested in this blessing of giving this, because it's my grain of sand as a playwright, as an activist, to put this into the world, and you take it. And I can't go all the places that the people here in this chat, and the people who are attending, the people you're going to interact with, the people that the senator is going to talk to. I hope she takes the link and that she uses it in her communities. And I hope the professor uses it in his, and so that we can have a part of the conversation that's necessary. And there's nothing except the fear of reality. And this is reality seen through fiction. So you can always say that's just a story if you want to. Whatever it takes to make people take that next step toward the healing process. And I hope this play plays a role in that, and national criminal justice reform. Because as good as each individual jurisdiction may be, we've got 18,000 police jurisdictions, over 18,000 prosecutorial jurisdictions. We must have national criminal justice reform. And so we know that Emmett Till to George Floyd, without it, we're going to have the next name, and then the next and the next. Sin after diabolical sin. Let's stop the madness. And I hope this play plays one small role in that healing and solution.
So we know something is actually happening right now. We know that, right? Here's a promise I'll make to you, Gloria, because I do think this is a powerful story, and it has been something seeing it, and I plan on seeing it again, that National Civil Rights Museum will give you an audience for it, because it is absolutely something. It's a story that we need to tell. And frankly, the perspective of it coming from the accuser is one that gives us, a little deeper insight to the consciousness of the accuser.
Yeah.
And I'll put an S on that because it's representative of a big group. So thank you so much, Davis Houck and Senator Ramesh Akbari and Bobby Field and Derek Johnson in his absence. And finally to you, Gloria Marshall, you've done it. You've done it, and you just keep doing it and doing it and doing it. So we're gonna hang around and see what's next, and we're gonna see this one again.
Thank you.
Please do.
Good night, everyone. Be safe.
Good night.